Well, thank y'all for being here this morning. I'm Jason with the Bryant Chamber, and thank y'all for being here. A lot of good-looking faces again, a lot of familiar faces. I think everybody's enjoying coming to this. I know we appreciate y'all doing this. Y'all have been busy since the last time we've seen y'all. This is a partnership that we put on every other year between the chambers. It's the Benton Chamber, the Bryant Chamber, and the Hot Springs Village Chamber. And we would like to thank all the representatives. Let's see, who's all here this morning? Andy Davis, is he here?
Yes,
Oh, there he is. Yeah. Miss Julie Mayberry, Laney Fight, Mr. Jason Kelly. I don't know this gentleman right here.
Probably don't want to.
Is Mr. Clark coming this morning? You know?
I was thinking he was, but he was coming in from Hot Springs, so he
Okay.
could run a little late.
And then Mr. Senator Kim Hammer. I miss anybody yet? No? Okay, everybody. So thank y'all for coming this morning. Our sponsor this morning is Saline County Economic Development. And Mr. Shane Broadway is going to just take a minute and tell us what's going on.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning to everybody, and thank you to the legislators for being here today and for their support. I'm Shane Broadway. I'm President of Saline County Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors. Our Executive Director, Mr. Lamont Cornwell, back there in the back, and just wanted to thank you all for your support. We have a lot of great partners throughout the county, Benton Chamber, Bryant Chamber, Hot Springs Village Chamber, the county itself, who work together, and that's what it's all about. It's about working together as a community and as a county to promote economic development. We talked about yesterday, companies that are going to locate here or expand here, they don't know what addresses they're looking at. They just see a spot on a map. They want to see people working together. They don't care what town that they land in. They just want to see people that are willing to work together, to come together to support them and the workforce that we're going to train. And so thanks to you, the Saline County Career Technical Center will be built. Thanks to the voters of Saline County, part of an initiative of SCDC and a lot of partners that made that happen. And then yesterday was very exciting news. As Coors Tech, a local company that's been here for many years, we had the governor here yesterday to announce a $26 million expansion of their facilities. And what you may not know, a lot of people when they hear Coors think beer. Same family, but we don't make beer here. What they do make though is body armor, the ceramic pieces that go into body armor that protect the men and women who protect us each and every day. Navy SEALs, Special Forces, what they call the three-letter agencies, DEA, FBI, CIA, all of those. All of that is made right here in Benton, and that's something that we should be very proud of. And so it's an exciting time. So thank you to our legislative delegation for all their support and working with AEDC and the governor. And we have a lot of great partners and look forward to working with each of you. And we're honored to sponsor today's breakfast.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Mr. Andy Davis, you want to lead off? Questions and answers? All right.
Am I doing the asking or the answer?
Well, either way. You ready? Come on up. Anybody got any questions? I know we do. Y'all are really good questions.
Hey, Andy, why don't you do transformation?
Kim, you want to talk about GARs and smallmouth bass or transformation?
That's my part. Okay.
Okay, we'll let you handle the hard ones. So I'm Andy Davis. Apologize, I haven't been here yet this session. Would have been here, but honestly, I just keep forgetting. So I appreciate the reminder, Jason. So we've had a lot to do this session. I've worked on several things, but I guess the big thing that most people are interested in that I'm working on is the transformation of state government and how that's organized. I can't remember the exact number, but the last time state government was reorganized, I think it was under bumpers. We went from 46 direct reports to the governor down to about, I think he took it down to 13, 12 maybe. So what we're doing in this reorganization is we're back up to 42 direct reports to the governor. We count all the boards and commissions and agencies that report direct to him, and we're taking it down to 15. The governor started a couple of years ago after the 17 session. He appointed a group called the Transformation Advisory Board. It was an unofficial volunteer board. Had a couple of legislators on it, myself, Speaker Matt Shepard, former Senator Eddie Joe Williams from Cabot, and then Senator Jim Hendrick, who's a Senate Pro Tem now. I also had a couple of state agency directors, several people from private sector and university level. And we hired a consultant, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we spent a couple years trying to figure out how we could transform state government. The governor's charge was not just to save money. It's easy for us to kind of latch onto that, and we get kind of focused on saving money. His charge is really to make it work better. And he said, sure, we want to save money, but we really want things, we want to provide the services we provide to the people better. We want it to be more responsive, we want to be quicker, so on and so forth. So how can we make things work better? And if we save along the way, great. So we spent a couple of years meeting regularly, going through lots of suggestions and reports. Kind of one of the things we did right off the bat, we had some graduate students at the U of A try to draw up an organizational chart for the state government. And after a few weeks, they just kind of said, I give. The sheet of paper was about the size of that wall over there, and they still couldn't get it all on there. So that's kind of one thing that we started focusing on. The PwC report, final report, we just released most of that last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I think there's some more of it coming. If you read, there was an article in the DMGAS, and I was quoted, and I mean, I'm serious when I say this, there were some comments in committee about you're not doing everything that was in the report. I said, this report can be a reference book for legislators for the next 10 years. There's so many things in there that we could do to make state government run more efficiently. There's no way we can do it all in one session. So transformation in and of itself is a big deal. It's a big bill, it's a big bite to chew, but there's still even more that we could do. So while it is big, we are trying to be measured in what we're taking on at one time. So transformation itself is very much just an administrative transformation. Boards, commissions, so on and so forth, say the medical board, for instance, nobody loses any of their regulatory authority, their rulemaking authority, their ability to hire and fire, things like that. All their cash funds, special revenue, they maintain all that now and into the future. The main thing it is reorganizing. We looked at all the boards and commissions and agencies across state government, and we've reorganized everything into 15 departments. Sometimes we call them cabinets because that fits with federal lingo, but in the legislation, there are 15 departments. And then most everything underneath the department levels are being renamed divisions. One of the reasons the bill is so large, it's a little over 2,000 pages, which I think is going to be the biggest bill in history, according to the Bureau. But the main reason is it's thousands of pages of name changes. Everywhere we had director, most of that has been substituted with secretary. Department is being substituted with division. So it's literally page after page after page of name changes. All these employees in each cabinet get reorganized under one umbrella. All the employees become employees of the secretary at the top. The reason that's important, and this is the primary point in transformation, is to make it so that we can share employees across divisions. So currently in state government right now, if agency B, maybe they have a seasonal need for a couple of extra employees, we actually appropriate extra help for agencies a lot of times, or they need to add one more person. Well, if agency C has a little bit of extra help, maybe they have somebody that's not too busy. Right now, in a lot of cases, we can't share that person, or we would have to run a special appropriation or a bill just to allow that to happen. After transformation, everything within these 15 cabinets, they will be able to share those employees. So that'll help us create a lot of efficiency in that way. The governor's been resolute. There will be no layoffs. He's not going to lay anyone off due to transformation. And he's also not going to increase any appropriations or any budgets. So everything that's done is going to have to occur naturally through attrition over time. So the way that'll look, and the way we've seen it happen in other cases where we've done some combinations, we've done some small efforts of transformation, such as we've combined rural services and ASTA into AEDC a few years ago. That alone has resulted in about $5 million of savings, and that was only about 100 employees. So now we're talking about transformation with 2,000 employees. So, amplify that. But anyway, that again, if HR person in agency A leaves, rather than replacing that person, then HR person in agency C can now be HR for both of them, assuming they have enough capacity, there's not too many people, so on and so forth. So that's a lot of where the savings will eventually come from. The secretaries will initially be tasked with drilling down into all the divisions underneath them and trying to find places where they can save administrative costs without reducing services, and while improving how those services are delivered to the citizens. Seemed like there's some other point I needed to make, but I can't remember it. So if anybody has a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll stop talking and answer your question. Yes, sir.
Question. I did a little reading on some of the history of reorganization.
Okay. I mean, we do have a drop program in the state. A lot of people take advantage of that. I'm not really up to speed on that or other retirement options for state employees. But, we've reduced the number of state employees, I don't know exactly, probably close to 2,000 over the last 4 years just through attrition, and the governor saying we're not going to just automatically fill a position. We're going to look and see where we can get help from somebody that's already here. So it's slowly occurring. I remember what I was going to say, just in terms of how we're running transformation. What we did is we began filing bills before session started back actually right around Christmas time. You have 15 cabinets, and then so we drafted 15 individual bills for each cabinet, and then we had a 16th bill that was kind of general provisions. Just think of that as like front-end documents on transformation and set up all the transfer mechanisms. There are a lot of things we have to put in place just to make sure we check off all the boxes, make sure all the employees keep their retirement even if they have to move from one place to another, so on and so forth. So we began filing those bills individually as they were ready to give members and the public and agencies and so on and so forth ample time to review those. I don't remember when the last one was filed, but they've been out there basically since the beginning of session. And then in both House and Senate committees, we reviewed those bills individually one at a time. The House is finished. We've reviewed all 16 bills. The Senate has one more to go, and they'll be finished reviewing all 16 bills. Now, as we've gone along, we've tracked all the changes that were found and suggestions, and so we've got a chart that we can show these guys in committee if they want to see it, of all the changes that have been made from the original drafts. And those bills will all be combined into one. The plan is for me to go file that bill today. So we're not going to actually take a vote and run 16 individual bills. They're all going to be combined into one transformation bill. That's a couple thousand pages that we're going to hopefully file today. Then it'll sit for a few days, probably run it in the House next week, and then it'll been in the Senate the week after that. So it's been very, very deliberated. We've spent hours and hours in committee going over literally line by line through these bills. So it's been very, very reviewed. Any other questions? You guys said this is a really big deal.
You're very thorough.
All right, any other questions, non-transformation for me?
House Bill 1290, the oral contraceptives by pharmacists.
Okay.
Well, you were the only House member to vote for it. I was curious, actually, I guess, why the others didn't.
Is that the one to allow pharmacists to prescribe?
Yes, right.
Can you repeat the question?
She asked, there was a House Bill 1290 to allow pharmacists to dispense oral contraceptive. I guess I'm the only one that voted for it. Thanks, guys. I don't know why they all voted against it.
A pro-lifer Packers, I would think would be, it's Bart Hester of all people as a sponsor,
Yeah, there's definitely a split, and I was very concerned about, in the House, Mary Bentley is one of the most pro-life members we
Right,
have, and she
right.
actually spoke for the bill.
Yes, and that's, yes.
I got emails for, emails against. I went to my wife, who's if I really just don't know, then go to your wife, right? And I said, and I asked her, I explained it to her, we looked at the bill, and I said, what am I missing here? For me, the reason to vote for it is because, I think it'll be a good tool to reduce abortions and teen pregnancies and so on. Not necessarily teen pregnancies, because it only allows them to do it for somebody over 18.
I don't see anything,
I didn't see anything dangerous or ominous about it. No. I'm sure my colleagues may disagree, but I
I should be
didn't.
asking them why they voted yes.
Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I have two questions. First one is about.
The question was, what are we doing? Are we doing anything to freeze state salaries or reduce vehicles and whatnot? Salaries, we're not freezing them. We did do a new pay plan in the 2017 session that addressed one issue we had with the old pay plan. It was difficult to give a really good employee a raise that they deserved without actually changing their position. So you had, it's kind of like in my business, if I have a rock star salesman, why would I take him out of sales and put him in something else? But that's what we were having to do, move employees to different positions so that we could keep them. But that meant we were taking them out of the role they were really good at. So we changed the state pay plan so we're able to reward good employees and have a little more paid differential with people in the same position. As far as vehicles go, that's actually one of the things in the PricewaterhouseCoopers report that they recommend doing. Rayanne said her agency is already doing a pool, and that's what Pricewaterhouse recommended, was we look at going to pools rather than individual departments having their own vehicles. And right now in vehicles and in real estate, it's really up to each department to do it however they want to do it. So it's one of the things they recommended was doing some consolidation and making that the same across all state government, doing more sharing. So that's one of those things that I think we'll get to it eventually, but you got to eat this elephant one bite at a time.
Another question I had was.
He's asking how much input we get from state employees. I get quite a bit. I go to church with several. We have a lot of talks in the parking lot after church. I think these guys would agree. I think we hear from state employees pretty regularly, but they tend to act like every other citizen and contact their legislator and let them know what they're seeing in their agency. All right, I feel these guys are dying to get up here. So thank you.
They probably would feel a little bit more comfortable with me addressing that question or giving you my reason. And yes, I did vote against that bill, and I'm very pro-life, and I understand that you might say that gives someone some protection that they may not have had. But I do believe that if you are sexually active, you need to be seeing a doctor. You're leaving out a very important person in that if you just go to the pharmacist. First of all, you have privacy issues. I don't think that you really need to be talking about those delicate issues in the pharmacy line. Everybody around, you're not going to be able to ask those questions freely to a pharmacist that you need to be asking about, what is this? How does it work? Just in my own personal experience, yes, I had birth control at a certain point in my life, and after using it for a while, I was starting to head into a mild depression. I didn't connect the two. Didn't understand why I was crying all the time. What's going on? Luckily, went back to my doctor, and the doctor said, I've got you on the wrong, medicine, let's change it. And I think those are discussions that you need to have with your doctor and not with the pharmacist. So there's also other things besides just pregnancy that you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of sexually transmitted diseases, cancers that go along with that. I just think that you're leaving out a very crucial person in that. So that would be my response to it. I can't speak for them, but just from a female perspective, I just think you need to see a doctor.
It was limited to 6 months though, right? And then you had to see a doctor before you could get.
Yes, but there's no proof that you've seen a doctor. You just say, oh yeah, I've seen a doctor. So I just see it differently, and there's also research on the other side that says that it doesn't actually lower it. So we'll just agree to disagree on that one. Can't make everybody happy, but anyway, some of the other issues. I guess, Laney Fight, are you excited about talking about the GAR?
No, go
So
ahead.
I'll let you do that. I was going to say something about it, but we did have some interesting bills on the House floor yesterday, and quite honestly, we kind of needed some of the humor. Because we're at that stage, I call the beginning stage kind of the honeymoon, and then by the end of the session, we're kind of in the divorce stage, or maybe even the after divorce stage. There's tensions up there, and it is kind of hard to stay level. So it was nice to have a little bit of humor on the floor yesterday, and a little bit of okay. There was a 5th grade boy who apparently for the last year has been really working hard. He loves the alligator gar, and very much wanted to make the alligator gar the fish for the game fish for the state of Arkansas. And got home last night and had to hear from my husband how horrible the alligator gar is and how it's a nuisance fish. And how we don't need that. But how can you vote against this 5th grade boy that's in the... So anyway, we had a little humor on that. There were a lot of petitioning. It should be the rainbow trout. It should be the bass. It should be the catfish. So anyway, maybe the Senate will take care of it, but it did pass. So some of the more serious issues, though. On Tuesday, I will be before a Revenue and Tax Committee, and I'll be presenting a bill that I've kind of talked a little bit about with this group, but it's a little different twist on it. We were looking for highway funding. That's no longer needed because that's already been decided. And so the bill that I've taken before to find money for highways, I'm now using to find money for something else that is highly needed. Many of you may be aware that we have a list of about 2,500 to 3,000 people now waiting for developmental disabilities services. And so these are people from children and adults who have Down syndrome or autism or spina bifida or cerebral palsy or whatever the diagnosis. And this is not their medical care. These are the things that Medicaid does not normally cover. So we're talking about maybe some equipment that they need in their house to make themselves more independent. Maybe it's a ramp to their front door. If they're in a wheelchair. Maybe it is services such as I need someone to pick up my child after school and care for them until I get home from work because I have a 16-year-old with Down syndrome that I can't put on a bus and just independently get into the house and stay home by themselves. So we would like to have someone there with that child until I get home. Maybe it's to allow someone to live independently, the adult. So those are the services that we're talking about that people have been waiting on a list for. Some families, eight years. We did find some funding sources in the last legislative session in 2017. My husband sponsored a bill that allowed some tobacco settlement money to be used to get about 500 people off of that list, and yippee, that has already taken place. There is another bill that was passed last session called the PASS system. Slowly, at some point, some of that money will be used to take people off of that list as well, but that has not taken place yet. And the tobacco settlement money is there now, but won't be there indefinitely. So we need to continue to look for funding sources. So the funding source that I am suggesting, we do allow you to deduct your gambling losses in the state of Arkansas. And I just am a firm believer that we don't need to subsidize gambling habits. That's entertainment. We don't subsidize any other entertainment. And that money could be used in a wiser way to help people who need the most help. And Senator Kim Hammer has co-sponsored this bill with me. I hope to get it through the House and over to the Senate for them to vote on it. But $245 million of income is not claimed in the state of Arkansas to be taxed because of these gambling deductions. And what that means dollar-wise in our general revenue is $11.5 million. And so the suggestion is to use 11 million, just give or take a little bit there, to put towards taking about 700 to 800 people off of this developmental disabilities waiting list. So hopefully we'll be able to get that through. I have some other bills dealing with school nurses. If anybody knows me at the Capitol knows that this is an issue that I talk about all the time, and I have not been able to get it through. Died miserably on the House floor last year, but that's okay. I still believe that it is extremely important. I believe that every school should have a school nurse. My daughter, who has spina bifida, luckily has had a school nurse on her campus since day one, and has always had a school nurse. And when I came to the realization that not all schools have that and not all children have that opportunity to have that school nurse there, it was very disturbing to me. And I know that without a doubt, my daughter's success in school, yes, has depended greatly on great teachers, but without that school nurse being there, she would not have been in the public school system. She would have been homeschooled, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being homeschooled, but I don't think she would have had the opportunities to do what she is doing now. She is a junior in high school, will be a senior next year. She's in an AP English class. She's an AB student. We expect her. She's been taking her ACT. We expect her to go to college. Those are all things that I don't think would have been as possible if she had not had these opportunities. So the school nurse has given me the ability to allow her to be in school without the fear of something going on. She sees the school nurse twice a day, every day. And there was one period of time where the school did not have the nurse because she left. Honestly, it was a new school nurse, and she got into it a few months and said, "This is too much work. I can't do this anymore." And she left. And so there was about a month of time where there was not a nurse on that campus, and they were sharing nurses between the two campuses. And that directly affected my daughter's schoolwork. I actually was not aware that that nurse was not there in the beginning, but about a week or two after, teachers started calling me and saying, "Katie's slipping really behind in class. You know, she's missing this, she's missing that, she's missing this." And so I started, what on earth has happened? What's going on? And then they explained to me, well, she's waiting in the school nurse's office and she's not making it into class. She's waiting on the school nurse to get over here. Once my daughter started missing certain things in class, her grades started dropping drastically, because then she's in this panic. And she's emotionally upset and just, I mean, we really struggled. And it's not because the teachers weren't there, it's because the nurse was not there. So it is important to the overall education of our students to make sure that that nurse is there. The bill that I have suggested this time takes it a little bit more in different phases and might make it easier for some of our school superintendents to handle it. Most school districts are doing a 750 to 1 school nurse ratio, meaning 750 students to 1 nurse. That doesn't guarantee that there's a school nurse on every campus, but it is the ratio that's out there. It's not often followed. Most school districts do follow that. And so phase 1 of this bill would just simply enforce that the 750 to 1 is going to be met. And then puts the date out much further to 2021, 22, got my dates kind of confused here, which would allow our legislative body another opportunity. Every 2 years they go through what's called foundation funding matrix, kind of looking at how we handle our funding and what that funding should be to each school district. And I do know that they would be looking at what the current law is, and if we update the current law to make sure that there's a nurse on every campus, we might be able to adjust it more in the matrix and give a more fair way of funding those schools with a higher standard of nurses. So I'm trying to phase it in and see if that can help a little bit. I have other things to talk about, but we have other representatives here, so I'll pass over the floor. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question before you leave, about your the school nurses thing.
Mm-hmm.
is that, it's on, you're going by every school campus or every school district?
Every school campus.
Okay, because I was concerned about like the Deedwood School District, which is the largest school district in the state, but it's spread out over eastern Arkansas. So that's why, and that's why I was concerned about it.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem. If you have a school nurse that's covering 2 or 3 campuses, how are you going to predict where that emergency might be? And also, if you have asthma, if you have a child with diabetes, they have that every day. They don't have it just on Tuesdays and Thursdays when the nurse is there. And the whole goal would be to get, I think our teachers are overstressed. We have added way too many things for our teachers to have to worry about and do. I mean, they're becoming, unfortunately, security guards as well. And this is one thing that they're not trained to do, and I think they would appreciate someone else handling. If the child is sick in class, that shuts down the whole class. If you have a child who is sick or is not getting the medication that they should be getting or what have you. And I think this just takes one thing off of that teacher's shoulder and gives it to the professional who's been trained to handle that and take care of that. So really, it's to help out our teachers too. So anyway, thank you.
Let me talk about 911. In City County Local, we are in the process of hearing the 911 bill. Let me explain a little bit of it. It came in and it was 4 parts to this bill. It's a high cost fund, and a high cost fund, let me explain it a little bit. It's a fee that you pay, and it pushes internet and fiber out into rural areas. And so that was one part of it. The other part of it was the panic button, funding the panic button. I think most of you are familiar with in schools, there's a panic button that notifies everybody if there's an event happening in the school. And then the other part of it was AWIN. We have a statewide radio that all police and fire and everybody has, and they can talk to each other, and it's very important. Well, the AWIN system has got to the point they can't even buy parts, replacement parts now. So this is part of the plan also. And then again, your regular 911 system. One of the problems that we have is when we first passed 911, everything was on landlines. And that fee has just, that landlines are dropping down daily. You might think they're landlines here in the hospital, but I promise you they're probably internet lines that they have here. And most businesses, that's what they are right now. And so there's being very little tax on that, so it's bringing this in, and also the cell phones, bringing the cell phones in, and it'll be an increase in the cell phones in which to fund this. And make a long story short, when it got into committee, it was going sideways, and we went all morning. Then we went into session. As soon as we adjourned, we went back to it, and the sponsor drew the bill back down, and I think she's probably going to cut out part of these 4 items. I'm not sure what she'll pull out, but we'll be hearing that probably next Wednesday. The other issue that I'm working on right now is homestead credit. I don't know if any of you kept up with it in the paper, but Senator Hendren and I have a different opinion on it. I would like to take the money. There's a surplus because of the Amazon sales tax right now, and we have like $102 million, $104 million this year. And what I would like to do is put it under an interim study and see if we can cut back the sales tax. You're taxed a 1/2-cent sales tax to fund homestead credit. And I'd like to either cut that back or increase the homestead credit. His bill also increases the homestead credit, but he takes out $8 million for voting machines, and then he's going to sweep the rest of it into general revenue. And in my opinion, we're doing nothing with growing government once we do that. That fund is expected to grow to $149 million by the end of this year. So I think it's important that we address what we do with that money and how we spend that money in the future. I feel like we pay that 1/2-cent sales tax for property tax relief. It goes into the property tax relief trust fund. And I believe it either should be for property tax or it should be, we should lower sales tax, which generates that fund. I see we're running close on time. If anybody has a question about 911 or Homestead, I'd be glad to answer that one. And yes,
You said $8 million on electronic voting machines. Will that even scratch the surface of what's needed in the state of Arkansas, or is that just a Band-Aid?
well, that is a partial. The counties will have to come up with money also. I would guess it's probably close to a 50-50 match with the counties having to come up with the other. The problem is, there is a bill coming out that's going to be a long-term cure to this. We have to buy electronic voting machines. We're way past buying them. We should have already bought them. And there's a bill coming out by Dan Douglas that will address that. And I look forward to that bill coming out, and it's a long-term, where the next time we have it, the money will be there. It won't be that we're robbing some other fund. Give you a great example of trust funds. You've seen in Northwest Arkansas at Bella Vista, the fire that's burning, the dump fire. Well, there's a trust fund, post-closure trust fund, that's supposed to take care of things like this. And it's been robbed to the point over the years that that money's not there. It's been used for other purposes besides post-closure. And if it was there, we actually borrowed the money and got to pay it back in 5 years. But again, when you set up a trust fund, I believe the trust fund should be used for that purpose and that purpose only. Any other questions? Yes.
This is one of the things I was talking to you about before the meeting here is that there are a lot of people want to know why you voted the way you did in the highway, the $300 million highway deal, and how that ties into our Republican Party platform and principles. Can you answer a little bit more about that? Why you voted a certain way, or the reason you voted that way, and how it ties into our party platform?
Okay. Well, let me say this about it was the governor's bill in which to do it, and it came from every different direction. It just wasn't in one spot. And I guess you're probably talking about Representative Mayberry's bill.
That has something to do with it.
Okay. Well, the first year that I was up there, the governor cut everybody 1% that it was under his authority. They cut libraries, they cut senior adult centers. There were several things that were cut, and there was a great outcry. And you can ask the representatives who are sitting at this table and the senator, and he will tell you that. When you start getting into general revenue, and you start funding the highway department out of general revenue, you're going to cut services in many other locations. Now, we did take some general revenue out of there, so we've done that. But if you end up taking all of it out of there, there would be services that would be cut everywhere.
I didn't know they had taken some out of general revenue too. One of the other things is that, there's recently been some news about the Highway Commission giving $1 million to the U of A for a building up there in Fayetteville that was taken out of commission money. There was some other things that have been taken out of commission money that was supposed to be for highways, and it's been divvied off into some other things. Do we need better control over our commission, over that highway commission, and what they're spending their money on? Do we give them for highway?
You're asking me if I think that?
Yeah.
We have a certain amount of control, but have a little more, yeah, probably wouldn't hurt, yes. And back to your House Bill 1290. One of the things that bothered me about it was, as Julie talked about, the checkup. I mean, you just simply said, yes, I've had it, and you go. And then I think there's liability that would be with the pharmacy. I know that high blood pressure is things that can be caused, and I think you were cutting out part of it. It sounds like a good idea. I don't know, did it pass at the House?
Eventually,
Has been
second
done.
time.
That's the house.
Yeah,
Okay.
second time.
But anyway, those were several questions that I think were unanswered from the well, and that was my opinion. That's why I answered it that way. Any other questions?
On the 911 issue,
Yes.
I've attended a couple of different meetings in the county and other counties. And one of the things that came up, I understand that, is there going to be an upgrade in the systems to work, since we have a cell phone now, is partnering with AT&T and some of the providers, and using their triangulation system to where they can triangulate within a few feet of where you're at. And they can locate you and then send appropriate help to you in that area. Right now, you have, if you're out in the county, you may just be across the line. You know, they don't know whether to send something from downtown, Hot Springs, or from the other, from out the county.
And that is not uncommon. And we have, I commend our county judge and our two mayors, Benton and Bryant. They are working together right now to look at consolidating, which would be save the taxpayers money and also improve service. And you're right, one of the things right now is you might call in and you're in Bryant, but the way that cell phone picks you up may send you to the county. And then the county does a one flip switch to send you to the right Bryant, and it may or may not go. You don't know, you know. It does 99.9% of the time, but that one time that misses could be disastrous.
One thing that I will quickly address is your question about transportation. And I think one of the best bills that we've passed out of the House this year is Representative Davis's efficiency bill regarding highway funding and how we spend money in the Department of Transportation. So I think moving forward, transparency and efficiency because of his bill will be pretty evident. I mean, everybody's got a perception of how we spend money for the Department of Transportation, but I think his bill will really help us identify where we need to spend, how we need to spend, make sure they're spending it right through the procurement and those kind of issues. So
The autonomy, Commission has they're an autonomous organization. They really, you know, how accountable are they to the legislators right now? That's one of the same questions I asked Lanny, is about the accountability on that, where we, you know, how we accountable.
I can't answer that question right now, but I think once this bill hopefully passes the Senate, then we can answer that. So, question from last time, the last meal on death row. I did get some clarification on that. There was some question last time about the last meal on a death row inmate. Typically what's happened now, those meals are pretty eccentric. They are time consuming from the Department of Corrections and expensive regarding Department of Corrections and how they prepare that meal. So all that will be come out of the current pantry. They won't go out of house anymore to get that food to prepare, and everything has to be prepared in-house. So no longer will that be prepared by Outback Steakhouse or anybody else. That will be prepared in-house, and it will be from the ingredients and the food that's in the pantry. That's how that is. 1290, I did vote against that bill. I think we got to be really careful on how we look at the scope of practice on that bill. I think our pharmacists, from the feedback that I received, was they're in the business of dispensing, not prescribing, and so that was really the kicker for me, and the liability issue of that one. So that's the reason why I voted against it. We've talked about over the last month about reporting child abuse in the state of Arkansas. Finally, that is passed all legal, and so I filed it yesterday, and it should be ready to run in committee on Wednesday. That is to keep all of us, if we report in good faith, that we are criminally and civilly immune from prosecution. So hopefully that will go through, and Senator Hammer is the sponsor on the Senate end, and so hopefully there will not be any apprehension on any of us as citizens of the state of Arkansas for reporting child abuse. Let's see. And I think that's about it. Any questions? I'll be really quick because I know Senator Hammer's got quite a bit to cover. Thank you.
I don't know if it's really quick because we got a lot to cover. You want to get down one or the other, but one thing I want to stress is, because you've heard about the GAR situation, you've heard about the highway, you've heard about the transformation, you've heard about all these other things. We are the people's representative. We are your front door to government, if you would. And you hear different things talked about, and to you may say, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. Well, guess what? The idea that you think is so important to you may be the stupidest thing that somebody else ever heard. So our job is to be open-minded, and I think that part of our job is that when you come to us with things, regardless how somebody else may perceive it, that it's essential that you get a voice. And so sometimes things get run that you may wonder, why are you doing that? Or why is that even being discussed? Because it may not be important to you, but it's vitally important to somebody else. Whether that's the young man who has the issue of the GAR issue, or whether it's somebody worrying about assisted living and funding at that level. It's all important because everybody's important. So please, in your attitude of the way you look at the job that we do, I'd just like to offer that perspective up, that you'd realize that we want to be ears to everybody of concern. Here are some things recently that have happened that we've gotten through or about on the verge of completing. To you that are in the business world, we were able to get the sliding scale on the unemployment insurance. Right now we're enjoying really good economic times in the state of Arkansas, so why should you be paying a maximum unemployment rate as employer? So the Department of Workforce Services came up with this concept, had the privilege of carrying the package for them. And what's going to happen is that in strong economic times, you'll be paying less unemployment rate. Right now in the unemployment fund, there's about $750 million. And based on their calculations, even if we had another 2008 event, we would be able to sustain it for 3+ years to get us out past that. And that is going to return a net somewhere between $40 and $60 million back to the employers in the state, which we hope they in turn generate back into more jobs expansion, building expansion, facility expansion. So that was a good one. There's one little tweak. There's a date that was wrong in there that's going to come back before us, but that one should pretty well be done in its journey. Tier funding for career education, we had a bill signing on it last week with the governor, and as I've reported before, I'll report to you again with our CTE center that I think Shane mentioned a while ago. Just coincidentally, the programs that we're going to be offering at the CTE Center are going to be in the upper tier as far as the funding amount, and so that was just an act of God and good planning that all came together at one time. And maybe a little help with some guys in the room or ladies in the room. Another bill that was successful in getting through, it's down on the House end, have no reason to believe. In fact, I think it passed actually. A requirement for electronic script, so that when your physician writes a script, it has to be electronically filed to the pharmacy. We still have a big problem with opioids, and will continue for a little while until some of these things get put in place to deal with this epidemic. Right now we have about a 3 to 9% fraud rate and with regards to handwritten scripts. And so now what happens is the physician, when the primary care physician writes the script, it'll be electronically filed to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy will have that received that way, and that'll cut down on that 3 to 9%. On the street right now, if you have a unsigned script out of a physician's office, it's $100. If it is signed by a physician, it's worth $500 on the street value, because then they fill in what they want. This is going to cut down on all this and eventually help curb what we feel will be some of the opioid epidemic, along with other things that are being put in place. A couple other things working on, trying to put some light on Freedom of Information Act. We get asked for money all the time from various agencies, institutions. Personally, I believe that sunlight is a good thing, okay? So working on trying to put some sunlight on some things, and also some accountability for those of you that are in the press. The situation with, this is the best example I can give you of the Catholic boys and what they experienced up in that state. One thing I want to try to do is get ahead of the learning curve and bring greater accountability for the press. So we want greater accessibility and information, but we want greater accountability with that information once you get it, and be responsible on every level. That's a good balance. Working on the PANS situation, had a really good meeting with Matt Brumley from Saline Foundation here, and UAMS, their lead physician up there, and also with Blue Cross Blue Shield, their lead physician. about trying to help get access for treatment for those that are being diagnosed with PANS. And that's a more controversial issue than I realized when I first got in it, because there's not common agreement in the medical field about the methodology of diagnosing, and the treatment for it is really expensive. But we've had some really good productive meetings this week, and hope to have something come forward on that to where those that have PANS or been identified with PANDAS would be able to get treated. One other bill that's coming up should be heard next week. Volunteer fire departments, believe it or not, those are dues, and they are established through an election process, a fair process, where the members of the volunteer fire department community determine what they think their volunteer dues ought to be. The problem is they don't always get paid. So that means you pay your dues, you get equal service on the fire department showing up at your house, but you don't pay your dues and they still have to show up at your house. I think that's a standard of fairness, and we're going to ask for it to be placed on the tax dues so that when your property taxes are paid, your dues would have to be paid first, and that funds our volunteer fire departments. Because one of the things we did last session as a result of some improper handling of GIF funds, that GIF money to our local fire departments and other good efforts in the community, that's dried up and gone away. So we need to make sure they got money to operate, because that directly, in fact, yesterday I had a meeting with the ISO representative out of New Jersey, flew in for a meeting. Your homeowner's rate that you pay for your property casualty is directly driven by an insurance company's methodology to determine what rate they should assign to you. A lot of the insurance companies still use the ISO rating system, and if we can get better ISO rating systems to the volunteer fire departments, guess what happens to your insurance rates, or should, okay? They should go down, and that's a substantial savings to you as a homeowner, which we as legislators can't touch and can't take, so it goes right back into your pocket, and that equates to millions of dollars potentially of savings. All right, one other bill I'm going to file this week. I've tried to get around, I don't know if I got around to all you guys. I'm going to file a bill this week that requires that if you're an elected official that's running, if you're going to file for office, you have to report at the time of your filing that you're current on your income taxes or you have a payment plan worked out. And the second thing it's going to do is for all first-time people that are going to enter into the political field, run for an elected office, they'll have to submit to a federal and state background check. I think that just levels the playing field, and it's good information for people to know, and it may keep out some bad actors. That's just one I'm going to file this week, okay? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment and then a question regarding the status of SB 950.
Could you tell us what that is? Because we've got so many numbers running around here. Which bill is it?
The minimum wage.
Okay, the minimum wage, yes, ma'am.
Or put in this week. I have an adult son with autism, developmental disability. He's going through Arkansas Rehabilitation Services and will be receiving supported employment and will be entering the workforce soon. This bill with these exemptions will directly affect him. It is targeting certain populations, one of those being developmental disabilities. How do I tell him that his work and what he does is not the same value of those without the developmental disabilities? He should be paid the same and not below minimum wage, and that's what this bill will do. It will allow employers to pay individuals with developmental disabilities below minimum wage.
I think that's a very fair point. Senator Bob Ballinger, isn't he the one introducing this? Yeah. Yeah, Lundstrom's got one. And those have just newly came out. In fact, and y'all may think, you guys need to know every bill coming. There's so many bills out there right now that we're finding out stuff from you before we find it out ourselves, okay? I would just say, I think your point is well taken, and specifically because you brought up that your child is a child with disability, I don't think that's a fair message to send to that population. That's just my personal opinion, and we'll express to the sponsors of the bills what your concern is, and I think you've got a valid point, just speaking as myself individually.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Along those lines, how do you feel about the Senator Ballinger's bill that seems to just undo what we voted for? I mean, it's odd that all but want to send something to the public to vote on about highways, and at the same time, legislators don't do what was voted on before.
Personally speaking, as myself as senator, I think you raise a valid point, and that's the question that's the debate of do we need to undo, kind of like, say marijuana even, all the other things that are referred out to the vote, to the public to vote on. And then, now the one thing I will say about the unemployment situation, this is just personal perspective. One thing we have addressed and are addressing are those that are out canvassing, getting votes. There are going to be stricter guidelines on those that are out there collecting those signatures, the messaging that they're putting out there, because those are, for the most part, hired individuals. Some are volunteers. They're out there trying to collect those votes and everything. The accuracy of the information that's being dispensed when those votes are being, or when those signatures are being gathered, I think is a big sticking point. You bring up a good point, and that's the debate we're going to have, is do we have the business of undoing what the people by constitutional vote have asked us to do, and that'll be the battlefield. One thing about the minimum wage, I'm not sure, and I think we were going to find out in the next 2 to 4 years the full economic impact of that decision and the true cost. And I think there's that debate to be had. To your point, I don't know that we do, but that's what we'll individually decide as elected officials, whether we have that prerogative or not. And it could stand, and it could be taken to court too, when it's all said and done. Any other questions? One quick one, because we're over time.
Okay, real quick, is, I understand that you introduced a couple transparency bills, or one or two of them in the bill. I was wondering why they were turned down so quickly. What's your point on that? Why do you think that is?
Question is regarding some transparency bills that I introduced. One of the big concerns was the committee members did not have the comfort level that the donor's ID and information was going to be protected, even though it was specifically in there. But that's the privilege of debate. You present your ideas, you go to the table, you defend it. Sometimes you get the votes and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you come back around if you don't, addressing what their issues are, and you circle back up. So, all right. Thank you all very much.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank y'all for coming. Seriously, it means a lot to us. And thank y'all for working together. I know this has got to be difficult, and it shows that y'all are working together, and it just means a lot to the public. It means a lot to us. Michael, Mr. Stewart, thank you so much for having us. You're so gracious for allowing all of us to invade you for being here. Lamont, thanks for sponsoring us today and feeding everybody. We will not meet in 2 weeks. That's going to be spring break. So our next one, I talked to Mr. Andy. We all be in session April 5th? Probably.
Oh, yeah.
More likely.
Not December.
Well, the next one will be April 5th. So we'll do one again in April 5th if y'all are good with that.
If I can wrap up one.
Okay. We'll see y'all April 5th, okay? Thank y'all so much.